All right. Morning. Have you ever noticed that sometimes people are a little bit stupid? Because I have. And it feels like that there are different instigators for that type of behavior or beliefs or whatever. Some of it might just be ignorance. Some of it might be uh, willful ignorance or a kind of defensive mechanism because they just don't want to see the truth or something like that. But there's a very particular brand of this that I was thinking of. It would have to do with the notion of like cognitive dissonance or that sort of thing. And you can maybe think of it as almost like a microcosm of like a personality disorder or something like a multiple personality disorder, where a person like is stupid in such a fashion that you think that almost has to be a hardware problem, where they're espousing two ideas that seem completely at odds with each other, and it shouldn't technically be possible. But it occurs to me, I had theorized about this in any case, that a person's brain might literally lack the connections in order for them to espouse both of those ideas or think about both of those ideas at the same time, right? So it might not even be an issue necessarily of hypocrisy or something like that. It might just literally be a hardware issue where their brain would never naturally allow them to think about both of those things in such a fashion as to actually reconcile them. Now, perhaps that could be brought about artificially through someone else trying to talk to them and show it to them, show that inconsistency to them. But, yeah. Anyways, I thought it was kind of an interesting idea. All right, some stuff to look at today, a couple of videos and the like. One by Coleman Hughes, and the other by, oh goodness, what was it? Oh, Dr. Mike, yeah, Dr. Mike. Sounds kind of good. Alright, is that about so? Just so? Alright. Yeah, we're good. Very good. Alright. The West suicidal empathy. Yeah. For the record, he goes into Islam a little bit in this thing. I might skip most of that in any case. But just to point out something here. Islam has problems, to say the least. Look up one verse just to get a kind of a test or a sample size cross section, to get a cross section of some of the issues maybe it has. Surah at Talaq 65 verse 4. Yeah, go look up that one if you. But to be clear, there are verses in the Quran that would make Hitler blush, or it's got issues. Okay, it makes early Mormonism look like a cakewalk. It makes the Spanish Inquisition look like a sewing circle. Okay, there's real problems. For the record, they're good Muslim apologists. Isa Kabir, I think, is one of them. Really nice guy. I don't know what exactly his sect of Shia or what his sect of Islam would be. It would maybe be Shia. I'm not for sure though. Actually, I don't know. But he's a really nice guy. Behind Veils was one just recently. Well, semi-recently. I think he had kind of gone after some of the bigger influencers, people like Ali Dawa or Muhammed Hijab, but all the actual popular Muslim apologists, people like Ali Dawa, people like Muhammed Hijab, Andrew Tate, Sneeko, they all seem to be kind of grade A tools a little bit. Yeah, like I said, Islam has some problems. Maybe it could be, fixed. Maybe they can be something, I don't know, reformed. You create some sort of messianic Islam, but as it stands, some real problems. All right, let's get into this. For the record, Coleman Hughes actually he did a rendition of a song recently. I'm thinking it's some sort of combination of something starting with a C and Stars and Stripe. He was playing, I believe, a trumpet. Another guy was playing like a Spanish guitar style type thing. Pretty good actually. It's on his channel if you want to check it out.
Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Coleman. My guest today is Dr. Gad Saad. Gad is a visiting scholar at the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom in Mississippi, and he is also an evolutionary psychologist. Today, we talk about Gad's forthcoming book called Suicidal Empathy, in which he argues that the political left has taken empathy to a dangerous extreme. We also talk about Gad's childhood as a Jew in Lebanon and his family's experience of the Lebanese Civil War. So without further ado, Dr. Gad Saad.
When it's not always raining.
For the record, this is actually in the video itself, which I actually kind of like as an idea. There's a part of me that thinks it's kind of beneath me to do ads or whatever, so the notion of just having them do their own ad and stick it into the video. But I guess it's kind of one of those things too where maybe they want the creator themselves to be the face behind it, so that could be it. Yeah. I guess I don't know if I could do a more interesting ad read than they could.
It's like this. When there's no one complaining.
You're good to me.
Days like this.
For the record, I don't know if I would actually really like Uber. That's a whole. I feel like they have exorbitant prices these days, especially. Well, sorry, not Uber. Uber Eats is what I was thinking of.
Mama
This
told
way is
me
way faster.
there be days like this.
Okay, Gad Saad, thanks so much for coming on my show.
Oh, I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you, Colin.
Just spot above his left temple there.
So tell me about your background growing up as a Jew in Lebanon.
Yeah, here might just be an age spot.
Right. Okay, so I was born in 1964, as you said, in Lebanon. We were part of a very, very minuscule community of Jews. At one point, there could have been a few thousand Jews in Lebanon, but by the time we were still there in the mid-70s, we were probably down to a few hundred people. My parents had
For the record,
steadfastly refused to leave Lebanon, perhaps not reading the writing on the proverbial wall. Much of my extended family had left well before the Civil War.
like I was just going to say, maybe it is a little bit hyperbolic to say that Islam is worse than early Mormonism. Early Mormonism was pretty bad. It's worth a look if you ever get a chance. It's like there was the Latter-day Saints. What was it? Something Smith, Joseph Smith. They actually go into that in the beginning of. Well, it's kind of like a parallel story, I think, with a lot of like truth in it. In one of the Scarlet Thread, Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, one of his stories goes into it.
Broke out in 75. Many of them to Israel.
It's kind of a retrospective involving one of the criminal elements in one of those. Well, criminal, I say, kind of a justified vengeance sort of story, I guess.
Some to France.
Yeah, but for the record, it's like early Mormonism was pretty bad. There was like polygamy, all sorts of. I think they actually had a whole thing of vengeance. There were prophecies about them full on taking over America, right? for the record, I think they've done away with a lot of those these days. They're pretty nice. I still don't know if I would want to see Mormonism take precedence in the country. I don't know how long it would be before some of those more theocratic ambitions came to the forefront, but be that as it may.
And some to Canada. But then the Civil War broke out in April 1975. And as you correctly pointed out, we typically think of Lebanon as really a dynamic between Christians and Muslims, a whole wide range of Muslims.
Oh, how dare you! No, the Jews are still in control.
Of course, there was also
Yeah.
the PLO there, the Palestinian.
It does feel kind of weird that people almost simultaneously give the Jews credit for
Middle East and the Switzerland of the Middle East. I mean, yes, there is some of that. Lebanon was, quote, a progressive, tolerant place, but those words are in the context of the Middle East. It's progressive and tolerant.
comparatively progressive and tolerant.
That doesn't mean that a Jew could aspire to be prime minister or president of Lebanon. As a matter of fact, in Lebanon, it's a confessional parliament, meaning that seats are assigned in parliament as
That's kind of strange.
a function of, how important that particular religious group is. And each of the positions, whether you are prime minister or president or speaker of the house, is reserved to a particular individual of a particular religion. As you might imagine, Jews did not get many seats in the Lebanese parliament. So growing up, I did face, Coleman, of some Jew hatred, a lot of Jew hatred. I'll give you a few examples. Many of these I explain in The Parasitic Mind. So, for example, when I was 5 years old, in 1970,
You say parasitic mind? Sounds like a Isaac Asimov story. We're maybe gonna skip this part. Well,
Gamal
Go into it a
Abdel
little
Nasser
bit.
had just died. He was the very popular pan-Arabist Egyptian president who was trying to unite all Arabs as one people against the evil Jews and so on.
oh, how delightful!
And as you might imagine, he found a large population that was willing to support his message. Well, when he passed away and the people would go into the streets to lament his passing, all I kept hearing as a 5-year-old, that was the first sort of memory I have of Jew hatred, was death to Jews, death to Jews. Everybody was proceeding down our street screaming death to Jews. I turned to my mother and asked her, well, why are they saying death to Jews? She says, shut up, keep your head down, be quiet. So that was the first time. I'll just give you one or two other stories and I'll turn it back to you. When I was about 8 years old, so maybe about 2 years before the Civil War started.
All right, we're gonna jump to when empathy turns pathological. I think here.
Appropriate contexts, when it misfires, it actually that although empathy is a great emotion to have in the appropriate contexts, when it misfires, it actually leads to great harm in the world. So to me, this seems similar to your idea of suicidal empathy, which I know is the topic of your next book and has gotten a lot of play on Twitter. So tell me what you mean by suicidal empathy.
Yes, thank you for that great question. And I mean, it's nice the way you framed it, because I'm already receiving tons of hit pieces written against me about how, I am the dark overlord. I'm the Jew behind Elon Musk
Yes, the puppeteer.
who's trying to
I think he goes.
create a dark world where we kill empathy. And sure, I mean, Elon Musk might be worth $400 billion, so you might think he's powerful. But really, there's always a Jew puppeteer that's kind of that is the architect of the diabolical plan
True. Sorry.
to kill empathy. Okay, so having said that, let's explain what I mean here. There are many psychiatric ailments.
I feel like you're gonna make a woke person of all the neo-Nazis or whatever. He's trying to kill empathy.
That when
To be fair, like it is interesting how like political position Sundoku. Yeah, that was right. Sundoku something. I was just saying it's kind of interesting how political positions can shift. It's like you'd wonder like how far, like if neo-Nazis didn't find a welcoming whatever on the right if they would just switch as much as they could to the left, or like how far would they bend what they were willing to accept? Yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit strange.
And expressed with
For the record, I think Sneeko is finding some. He's kind of one of the top persons these days, and he's willing to make inroads with people like Hassan a little bit, saying, "Yeah, we have some stuff we agree on," you know.
then adaptive ranges are evolutionarily
Like even Nick Fuentes was talking like that about Hassan. It's weird. Like there is almost like I almost tend to be a bit of a fan of the horseshoe theory a little bit, in that it does feel like the extremes of a thing are whatever. And you have people who would say the Jews are in charge of everything, the Jews are controlling everything. And then on the left you have Hassan, he wouldn't say the Jews, but he assigns kind of that same level of paranoia to the actions of Israel and what they're capable of doing. I believe he has multiple times used the words spiritually Jewish, which feels like the most loaded sort of language ever. Correction. I believe he says spiritually Israeli. That's the phrase he uses sometimes. Agents of Israel. So again, it's the same type of like paranoid rhetoric applied just to the state of Israel rather than Jews themselves. It's again, big fan of horseshoe theory.
appropriate, but the problem arises when they become dysregulated. So let's take, before I give you
Sorry. Let me go back here.
said that, let's explain what I mean here. There are many psychiatric ailments that, when expressed within adaptive ranges, are evolutionarily appropriate. But the problem,
I like what he's saying here. And I was thinking about this notion of kind of abominations or perversions or aberrant creations, I guess. And I think we almost tend to think of them as things that are like outside the natural order, which I don't know if it's entirely correct to do so. Like, I tend to think it's reality. There is no outside per se. It's more that they consume themselves with a subset of reality. And for the record, I think in this scenario, like right now at least, he's talking about in terms of biology. I was thinking of it more in terms of psychology, where you can effectively have an entity which folds in on itself, right? It folds in on itself and becomes consumed with its own existence, if that makes sense, like a type of narcissism, which effectively they create their own bubble, and it's a thing that kind of refuses to accept any sort of outside input, if that makes sense. Like it turns into this entirely self-referential entity / individual / whatever, and the desires, the behaviors, the beliefs that result from that are entirely warped into this like grotesque, incestuous, impractical sort of thing. And it's impractical because it doesn't involve any sort of real interaction with the greater sum total of reality, if there is a sum total. Let's stay out of that though. But it's a thing that is entirely unwilling to take any sort of part in interaction with, the rest of reality. Again, it's not outside of per se. Perhaps it's functionally disconnected, but it's more just at odds with everything and everyone that is not perceived to be a part of its own being. Yeah, that made sense. Anyways.
arises when they become dysregulated. So let's take, before I give you psychiatric examples of that, let's do another example.
So I guess he does go into psychology of it.
Cancer cells are cells, except that they've gone rogue, in that despite the fact that cancer cells are meant to replicate, cancer cells don't have a mechanism of stopping that replication. So what started off as a adaptive process that you would expect cells divide, becomes maladaptive, and it can kill you when it is expressed, in this case, in a manner where there's no stopping mechanism. Okay.
I think I'd heard about that. Actually, again, it was from this whatchamacallit, Isaac Asimov's story, The Hostess, really good story. But the parasitic mind, I think, is also kind of it's a notion from that story. I'm not sure if he's copying Isaac Asimov's homework or not. Probably not. Like, I'm assuming, I don't know if Isaac Asimov even came up with that himself. Oh, no. There it is, yeah. The parasitic mind. I need to look that up, because I'm pretty sure that's in that actual story, The Hostess. The Hostess. Parasitic. Isaac. For the record, his book comes up first, actually. Zoom. Yeah, and a parasitic mind-altering life form. It's worth a look sometime if you get a chance. Really, really good story. Kind of interesting. It almost like takes a little bit of a different view of Genesis, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it's an intriguing idea in any case.
Now let's apply that principle to, say, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a phenomenon that I've actually written academic papers on. OCD is the maladaptive expression of an otherwise adaptive process. So that's a lot of fancy academic lingo, but let's break it down very easily. For me, I meet Coleman. Regrettably, I don't think that we did meet at the University of Austin, but had I had the pleasure of meeting you, and I would have noticed that before you shook my hand, you sneezed into your hand, and then we're about to shake it, then it would make perfect adaptive sense for me, quietly and discreetly, after I've shaken your hand, to go to the bathroom and wash my hands, because I don't want to catch Coleman's cold. Therefore, having a germ contamination fear is perfectly adaptive. However, if it becomes hyperactive...
That's ridiculous. All those germs. Let your kids play in the dirt, okay? Makes them tough. Toughens them up. For the record, I think there are actually studies that would seem to... Well, put it this way, I don't think you should necessarily mollycoddle your kids. I think sometimes, like, parents who maybe actually put their kids in too sterile an environment, they're actually, like... I think I've heard the term anti-fragile with regards to kids, and that's probably a good way of describing it. Like, they're very anti-fragile. So I think particularly when they're young like that, they're very capable of bouncing back from stuff like infections or stuff like that. And I feel like the more you put them in a sterile environment, the more you kind of kneecap their development to some extent.
To the point whereby...
So it's maybe better if you allow your kids a little bit of a leash within the realms of safety and whatnot, but in good hygiene, just let them be kids, I guess.
I spend 8 hours a day at the sink in front of scalding hot water where my skin is falling off because I am obsessively washing my hands. I can't get to work, and therefore I've now lost my job. That's germ contamination OCD symptomatology. What started off as a very adaptive mechanism to avoid Coleman uses cold becomes a very debilitating problem. So now you can see where I'm going to go with empathy. Empathy is a perfectly adaptive, noble virtue when properly expressed. For you and I to have a meaningful conversation, we both have to have theory of mind, which is to be able to put ourselves in the mind of the other in order for us to have this.
And I've thought about, like, I think that's a very interesting thing, but I guess I'd mentioned this in one of my previous videos too. I tend to think it can, unless you know the other person very well, I tend to think you'll never have like a perfect mental image of who or what they are. So it gets very weird, especially when you're in a scenario where you don't know the people and you just get really paranoid about, okay, what are they thinking about me? You get too much in your own head because you're trying to judge their reactions to your reactions to whatever. And it feels like past a certain point, you just have to go by what people say and not worry too much about what they think, and just do your own thing regardless of what other people, or what you think other people are thinking. But this idea of, trying to figure out what other people are thinking can be very useful. So I'm a little bit torn there. Like, maybe there's a happy medium there where, like, you can figure something out with regards to that.
Valuable conversation. Autistic children, by the way that we're able to establish that they are autistic is we give them early in life a theory of mind test, which they fail. There is no blood test that you could give to establish that a child has autism, but
Strange.
typically they fail the theory of mind test, right? And so therefore,
See, I wonder how much of that has to do with like a very healthy relationship with your parents or siblings or something like that would allow you to adapt in that way. Because like mimicking other people's mentalities is something I think you probably learned first from your parents and stuff like that, where you learn how to mimic another person and how they might think or act. And they're probably the people you would understand the best, generally speaking. So if you lack that meaningful connection with those people, or something, I don't know. There would probably be a number of factors involved in that.
while it is perfectly reasonable for a social species like Homo sapiens to exhibit empathy, the hyperactivation of empathy and the erroneous targeting of who should be privy to our empathy becomes suicidal empathy. And so let me give you an example. The classic trolley problem that you see in moral philosophy, where you say, should you press the lever to kill one person here or 5 people here? Well, when you study that problem or many other types of problems, people have an evolutionary based calculus that determines whether if you place a gun to my head, am I more likely to save my biological child or a random child? Well, it may not surprise you to know, Coleman, that most people, roughly 99.9% of people on Earth, if the forced choice of choosing, would be more empathetic and jump in front of a bus to save their own child rather than a random child. That doesn't make them callous. It doesn't make them evil. It simply makes the point that our cognitive, emotional, moral, perceptual, behavioral systems have evolved to solve evolutionarily relevant problems. But what suicidal empathy does, and we can get into the reasons why suicidal empathy arose after I explain the mechanism. Suicidal empathy says, no, the felon who's only been arrested 137th times before, therefore he deserves a second chance, because white supremacy is
it's a little bit
more deserving of a 138th chance than the person who ended up being clobbered by him, as we saw in the recent case with the Ukrainian woman on the bus or subway or whatever.
Irina Zarutska. There was something where there was a mural of her that they were fiddling with, or I guess the city didn't want it there or whatever because it's controversial, which I guess, like, I kind of understand the notion, but I also think if it were in another direction, there would be a very different sort of behavior surrounding it.
Right? So we care more about the rights of the felon than we care about the victims. We care more about the rights of the Muslim noble rapists in Britain than we care about those whiny, entitled British.
And it feels like that whole notion in general, it's a very short-term sort of perspective to take, because in the long term, when these things come out, which they always do, like, it's worse for the community in general if you're the people who stood by this guy and covered for him. It's worse for the community in general if the rest of the people are looking at this group and saying, oh, you're giving them special treatment, huh? You do understand, like, this is academic for me because it never really happened to me, but I assume, generally speaking, The teacher's pet gets their ass handed to them at recess. They get the shit beat out of them. So treating a racial grouping or a religious grouping or whatever in a special fashion, whether it's good or bad, you're singling them out. You're singling them out for that sort of thing. So again, I feel like it's a very short-term perspective to take.
White girls. So when it comes to the moral calculus of should we have greater ire towards the ones who gang rape 12-year-old girls for 6 months, but that would necessitate that we say that they were all coming from a Muslim background. Well, no. Our empathy module, our suicidal empathy module should much more target, being kind towards the Asian men, because we have to come up, by the way, with euphemisms.
Yeah, they were doing kung fu all the time when they were in prison. Sorry.
To hide their identity. Japanese men are Asian. Lebanese men are Asian. But it turns out that when we're talking about Asians here, wink, wink, we're talking about largely 99.9% of Pakistani Muslims. So we care more about the whole.
Do they consider like Middle Eastern people Asian?
Homeless people who are shooting up heroin in the public parks than about the rights of your children and mine to be able to be in that park because we pay taxpayer money so that we don't have to avoid the needles in the park. So what I show in the book is that most of the domestic and foreign policies that are orgiastically destroying the West stem
Orgiastic. It's a bit of a strange turn of phrase, but I suppose maybe it works.
from this misguided empathy.
So how did Western cultures come to adopt this trait of suicidal empathy? Where does it come from?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Marxism.
And I get into all that in the book. So let me give you a few psychological factors, but we can also get into historical factors and so on. Suicide exists throughout history for all sorts of reasons. And some of those reasons, by the way, could be explained via an evolutionary lens, which sounds paradoxical at first because suicide is the ultimate manifestation of lack of a survival instinct. Yet it turns out that even the erasing of one's life could itself be an adaptive evolutionary based mechanism. But let me give you a few.
There's a weird dynamic with regards to suicide. You tend to think of suicide as being like very selfish, which is technically, I think, true. Like the notion would be, generally speaking, that you would distinguish or draw disparities. You would delineate any type of suicide that involved dying for a cause. You would put that in the category of sacrifice. You're sacrificing yourself for a good cause. But I think, generally speaking, you would also say that no one kills themselves for what they believe is a bad reason. On some level, what they're doing makes sense to them. Now, maybe it's just repeated failure that brings about a type of despair in them. Maybe it's the shame of blank thing that they just can't live with. Maybe whatever it is. But in their mind, somehow, the action they're taking is the most logical thing they could do, or the most moral thing they could do. Like, I don't know how exactly to explain that. It's kind of strange, though, to think about it.
Examples of historical manifestations of suicide, and then we can get into the specific manifestation of the current suicidal empathy. So, seppuku in Japanese culture, which is a highly high honor and shame culture.
See, that's like, how would you define that? Because it's a thing they're doing out of a sense of honor. Like, so they're taking their own life. Now, I think it's stupid. Oh, goodness. There may or may not be another one coming. I think it's a stupid idea, but in their mind, they're giving their life for what they believe to be a good cause. So is that suicide, or is it, sacrifice? I don't exactly know. Like, how exactly would you define that?
Not unlike the Middle East. There is nothing worse.
Well, suicide bombers would technically be in the same category, but again, is it suicide? Is it what you define as suicide?
for a honorable Japanese warrior than to do something that brings about dishonor. So for all sorts of reasons, we could decide whether placing that value, honor, as the most important virtue and to never want to lose it. We could debate whether that's a good idea or not, but for various reasons, that becomes the fundamentally most important thing to ascribe as the ultimate apex value. And if I engage in any behavior that makes me lose that honor, then the only way to remedy that, the only redemptive path, is for me to engage in seppuku. I literally, put the knife in, and then therefore I can expatiate the shame that I brought for being.
That's an unfortunate notion of redemption in my mind. But to be fair, Japanese is kind of a bit strange in some regards. But yeah,
Being a dishonorable man, right? There are many cases, for example, Masada in the Dead Sea, where the Jews, knowing that they were likely going to face a very ugly reality, decided to commit, collective suicide. There are cults where
what the Harry?
people commit suicide for some transcendental reason. And so the concept.
Sorry, this is terrible. My mind was just jumping to the whole. There's a Key and Peele sketch where they were like, Key and Peele were both they were members of this cult that had oh goodness, they had basically committed suicide in order to get beamed up to a ship or something like that, and Key and Peele had fortunately avoided drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever it was that had the poison in it, and then they were kind of being interviewed about what had gone on in the thing there. It was kind of hilarious. Very morbid, but hilarious nonetheless.
Of suicide itself can be studied through historical, cultural, and evolutionary lens. But then the question to your point, why is the inequality of empathy in this manner? Imagine if I can convince a large swath of population that there is nothing more noble, nothing more. There's a beautiful term, I don't remember the gentleman, he called it moral preening, right? So imagine peacocking, right? Imagine, right? We know, for example, that the peacock tail could not have evolved because it confers a survival advantage. It only evolved through sexual selection because it provides mating advantage. It is basically saying to the female peahens, despite this very burdensome tail, look at me, I'm still surviving. Don't you think that that's an honest signal of my quality, and therefore you
To be fair, yeah, I guess if it works, it works.
should choose me? So now imagine, and then if you want, we can drill down further why that is the case. But imagine if I can develop a contagion, in this case called suicidal empathy, that renders it that the greatest goal that I could aspire to be is to be so committed to my progressivism, so committed to my non-racism, that if I have to commit civilizational seppuku, a term that I introduced in the book, in order to demonstrate that, so
Civilizational seppuku. Interesting idea.
be it. So in the same way that Narcissus in Greek mythology was so enamored with his beauty that he ultimately ended up drowning because he fell.
Narcissist. My goodness. I don't know if maybe English isn't this guy's first language. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong for the record. I guess I don't know, but like I for the record, I would have thought like seppuku. Seppuku. That's I think how I would have said it. And Narcissus is a guy who would look into a pool because he couldn't look away from himself, forsaking all. You know what's another weird one? Hermaphroditus, which I guess I there's probably a good reason why transgenders don't really use him as like their paragon of, oh, they did this in the ancient world, blah blah blah. There was a whole god of Hermaphroditus. You like if you look into the stories behind that, he was literally the result of a woman raping a man. Like there was a nymph who basically wanted to be with a young man. She kind of forced herself on him, clung to him or whatever, and prayed to the gods that they would become one forever or whatever. And they honored her prayer, and then, bippity boppity boo. Again, weird story. I digress.
Into the well when he was looking at his, beautiful morphological feature on his face. As a suicidally empathetic person, I would like to look at the moral mirror, and what I want to see as a reflection is I will not discriminate against my rapist. I will not wish ill towards my rapist. As we know, by the way, from a 2013 case where a Norwegian man was sodomized by a noble Somali, and after
What the heck?
the noble Somali had a very short sentence, 3-4 years, because the Scandinavians are more virtuous than we are. They don't believe in severe punishment.
Okay, I've asked this question before. It feels like there has to be a point at which you stop justifying actions with, oh, think of the context. Think of the historical context that this man had to go through. Like, and maybe that wouldn't be a question with a Somali in that case. It's just, oh, he's an immigrant. He doesn't really understand things. Like, is there anything you wouldn't justify with that? Where's the line there? Where's the line?
When he was going to be returned to Somalia, the one who had been sodomized by him, because, by the way, he writes that he is a feminist and anti-racist as his fundamental marker of his identity, was racked with guilt that he was going to be, the sodomizer was going to go back to Mogadishu. Imagine the horror, Coleman, that sodomizer will not be able to self-actualize the way Abraham Maslow taught us to self-actualize. So suicidal empathy is a form of moral lobotomy where you no longer are abiding by all of the evolutionary-based computational systems in your mind because you've transcended that. You are on a higher moral plane. I don't know if I've been too philosophical here, but I hope I've answered your question.
So I want to just linger on the example you've been talking about a bit, because if you haven't heard of it, it actually sounds like something out of a white supremacist dark fantasy, or it just sounds like far-right misinformation. But there actually has been, for at least 10, 15 years, and if not earlier, scandals in the United Kingdom, the Rotherham scandal being, for instance, the most famous, where you literally have grooming gangs of mostly what they call in the UK Asian, but we would call Pakistani men that have raped young girls in numbers that...
It feels like there would have to be some sort of subset for that, like Southeast Asians. Because Pakistani, I think, is right on the border there. Like, I would have thought like India would have kind of been the cutoff point a little bit. And then everything else would have been like Middle East. But maybe they categorize the whole thing of it as... Make it Asia Minor? Is that, no, technically, I think that's just Turkey, maybe.
Are difficult to believe when you actually read them. And this has been reported in even mainstream sources, mainstream left-leaning sources like the New York Times and the BBC and so forth. And there's obviously a frothy element of the far right that loves to linger on these details and probably exaggerate them. But the truth is, even with...
to be fair, I don't think he's wrong there. I think there are people who... The type of people who like quietly yell every time something like this happens. Huh, interesting to hear. Blah, 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 blah. It's the same way where like if any sort of like white supremacist or someone does something on whatever the right or something, people are like falling over themselves to point out this exception to the rule or something like that. You know, it goes both ways, unfortunately, and it's annoying both ways, unfortunately. I say unfortunately. No, it's just annoying.
Without exaggerating them, the details of those scandals are just crazy, and they would be enough to make someone a single-issue right-wing voter and an immigration restrictionist in the context of the UK. And so that's an example of left-wing suicidal empathy, in my view. Meanwhile, on the right, I want to ask you this because, you know, is the concept of suicidal empathy just sort of a stand-in for the left-right debate in general, or is there an example of problems with empathy on the right? So, for example, in America, we've had this debate on U.S. aid for quite a while. Now, whatever you think of U.S. aid right now, of us sending taxpayer money to Africa, it's not disputed that we saved tens and tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of lives by...
For the record, I think I didn't be a good bit like less isolationist than a lot of people. I like the notion of... I guess maybe I tend to be more though of like a private like venture type of thing with regards to charity. Like I've said this before, I tend to think government programs, they're a little bit of like a juggernaut. They don't necessarily start when they need to start, and they don't end when they need to end, and they lack a type of versatility that you would maybe want from, you know, charitable organizations, because they're not as localized as perhaps they could be, especially when it comes to like federally funded and federally organized movements or whatever. So yeah, maybe we differ on that at least.
Sending aid to Africa in the 2000s during the AIDS crisis, and this was this wasn't a woke policy. This was George Bush, and it was one of the crowning achievements of his presidency. And, you know, regardless, I'm open to the idea that has outlived its usefulness. You know, I'm not an expert on foreign aid, and really most of the people talking about the subject aren't. But there is a certain casualness with which people on the right are just happy to terminate our foreign aid all around the world without a deep sense that, well, we should really check if this one isn't still saving thousands and thousands of lives before we just turn off the tap.
Well, yeah, never mind.
So my question is there a problem with too much empathy or too little empathy on the right? How do you view the relationship between empathy?
We'll see. If this gets too much into the weeds politically speaking, I'll jump to tariffs. Right and left just tribes. You know, we'll go into this one. It's maybe a little bit more academic, so I don't know if I really want to get into.
So my next question came from a conversation I had with two brothers who are political scientists. I think their names are Verlin and Hyland Lewis. I could be getting that wrong, but they're the Lewis brothers. They wrote a book, I had them on my podcast, where they argue that the political tribes of left and right are just that. They're tribes. There's nothing more to the left and the right at a conceptual level than it's just two tribes of people, like two sports teams, that...
See, like, I think I would almost agree with that a little bit. I've mentioned this before, but I tend to think that political policies, they're not intuitively linked. And I was talking about this before with the neo-Nazis. Like, how far would they be willing to go if it got them what they wanted with regards to Jewish or Judaism or Israeli interests or something like that? If they were willing to, like, how many compromises would they be willing to make? And I tend to think politicians, there's not really an intuitive, like, beyond, like, maybe, like, a little bit of conservatism if they like where the country is or they like the founding policies. Beyond that, I feel like with regards to the more, like, litigious aspects of, like, the actual positions they run on, I don't know how intuitive it is. I feel like politicians just say, hey, here's the thing people want. Let's run on the platform of doing that thing. Here's the thing people don't want. Let's run on a platform of getting rid of that. Like, and how those things shift and the political landscape shifts, I don't know if there's anything really intuitive about it for the most part. And again, it feels like you tend to grow up thinking, oh, these things just, they go together, right? All of these things, like politics isn't morality. Not exactly. In an ideal world, it would be an expression of morality, but as it is, it's an application, and the application, it feels like politics in general is just a touch more arbitrary than the actual idealistic things themselves, than the actual ideals themselves, that is.
Have as their badge of inclusion in the tribe just a rotating basket of beliefs that don't have anything inherent to do with each other.
See, I think I would almost agree with that.
And the reason this is, if true, this is a profound statement, is because there are many other serious people that believe the left and the right represent something deep. There are people who believe the left and the right represent a certain genetic profile. In other words, people with certain types of genes tend toward left-wing beliefs, and other types of genes tend toward right-wing beliefs. That it's certain types of personality profiles. Like if you have more of an authoritarian personality, you go to the right. If you have more of a high in like trait open-mindedness, you tend to go towards the left. So that the right and the left actually represent different psychological tendencies within the human species and are actually different in some way, behaviorally, cognitively. And then there are people like Thomas Sowell that argue that there are two basic philosophies in politics, the tragic vision and the utopian vision. The tragic vision sees human nature as inherently flawed, inherently imperfect, and you have to accommodate that with your political system. And the utopian vision sees human nature as perfectible in principle. Like we can all become...
Yeah, for the record, I think I would tend to lean more towards the former than the latter. And it feels like anything else is a very... Well, again, like, I'm not saying we can't better ourselves, but the notion of, like, the perfect humanity is... I think there are cosmological events that need to occur first. I'm not saying, like, hell needs to freeze over first. I'm saying, like, Jesus... Like, as a Christian, you believe Jesus needs to come back for that perfection to occur. Right, as it stands now, people are what they are. They're flawed. They have issues, and with regards to the corruption of any given person or any system or any dynasty of leaders or whatever, it's a question of when, not if that makes sense. Like it's kind of like it tends to be almost a little bit more cynical, which is strange for a Christian because you want to believe that everyone can be saved, and I do believe that everyone can be saved. But there's also this element of taking humanity as it is at this moment in time, I guess.
Better in principle and live like one big happy family. And so where in that debate do you sit? Do you think that the left and the right represent real conceptual phenomena, or do you think that they're just tribes?
It's a bit of both. And again...
I think I would say that too. It's maybe a bit of both.
And I expected nothing less of you. I love your deep questions, so I appreciate them. So let me start with the part that seems to agree with the Lewis brothers. There's a great book, and I always feel as though I should be getting some of their book royalties because I keep promoting their book. There are two French psychologists by the name
French. Get him out of here. Who cares what they think?
Of Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber. They wrote a book called The Enigma of Reason. And in the book, they're evolutionary psychologists, and in the book they argue that there isn't a sort of domain general quest for humans to seek truth, meaning our reasoning capability didn't evolve to seek some objective truth, but rather to win arguments. So to your point about tribalism.
Strange. I don't know if I would agree with that entirely.
So it doesn't matter if Donald...
Like, people kind of go at this, and I guess I tend to think truth is, in the end, always advantageous. Like, I would think of it like this. If a thing is good, on some level, it has to be functional. And to be functional, it has to be in accordance with reality. If you think of it like, if people in a square room are trying to act as though they're in a circular room, eventually they're going to start running into walls. So again, for a belief to be good, it has to be functional. For a belief to be functional, it has to be on some level in accordance with reality. It has to be in harmony with the greater sum total. If there is a sum total, never mind. Let's not get into that. But yeah, I would tend to take that position.
Trump, finds a way to cure cancer himself in the lab, because then the left will say, as you probably heard the quip at this point, this means that there'll be a lot of oncologists who would lose their job, and therefore he's really a bad guy because he's hurting the economy by solving cancer. All right.
I'm gonna guess that would probably happen to some extent.
So therefore, there is an element of truth to what the Lewis brothers are saying, that a lot of the disagreements really are not about right or left substantive issues. I just want to say what is exactly opposite to the other camp, because it is terribly satisfying for me to demonstrate that I'm right. And I'll just make one more point about this, then I'll argue for the opposite position, that there are inherent differences between the two tribes. I was once on a show about a year and a half ago, hosted by a British psychiatrist, and he was the only one in the thousands of shows that I've done to ask me the following question. He asked me, Professor Saad, in all the years that you've been a professor and behavioral scientist, what is the single phenomenon that has most surprised you about the human condition? Which is a tough question to answer off the top
It's a bit broad. Look, you would maybe want to nail it down a little bit more specifically.
of your head. And I paused for a second or two and I said, probably the inability for people to change their minds once it is anchored solidly in cement, right? I could offer you all the evidence in the world.
Well, the thing is, I think there's a little bit of reasoning behind that, because changing your mind is difficult. To uproot the foundations of how you think and to think differently about stuff it's a very hard thing to do. So maybe there's a degree of laziness that's innate in this notion that people don't want to change. They don't want to admit that they were wrong about blank thing, because that would require them to do a lot more work on themselves or figure out how to reconcile this with other things that they believe or something. I feel like that can be some of the motivation behind it, perhaps.
And nothing's going to alter your position. So I think there's definitely something to be said about Lewis' position, but it isn't true that it's all bullshit and there aren't any stable traits that differentiate between these two visions. And in that sense, I'm much more in line with the great Thomas Sowell. One of my great regrets in life, he's still alive, is that we came very close to holding a chat together, but then it didn't end up happening. I still hold out a
Sorry, I was just noticing. I think people say that a lot about him, the great Thomas Sowell, and I'm not even saying it's wrong. Again, I just find the fact that everyone else likes him so much, the contrarian in me just wants not to like him because of that. On principle, I don't like popular people, but again, I think I would agree with him on a lot of stuff, probably, but don't come at me. Don't come at me.
very minuscule hope that maybe one day we'll be able to have a chat, because he's the OG of fighting all of this woke nonsense when we were in diapers, if not even born. So let me explain what are some of these fundamental differences. And I'm going to use now, rather than personality traits explaining the two tribes, because there is a lot of evidence in support of that, I'm going to actually do something that might surprise you and your audience. There are morphological differences between members of the two tribes. And
Like how people grow, or like their faces?
so it turns out that the physical formidability of a man, as measured by a whole bunch of metrics, including, for example, his just physical strength, determines his positions on a whole bunch of issues that are either left or right. So let me give you an example.
That is really intriguing. But I suppose it would have to do with the notion of like whether or not you maybe would lean towards I'll pull myself up by my own bootstraps, versus there would maybe be like political positions involved in that type of psychological dynamic. So if you're a person who is very capable on a physical level, if you're a person who can very much kind of make your own way to some extent, yeah, I guess I could see that. It's a little bit intuitive. Anyways, go check the rest of this out if you want. The West Suicidal Empathy by Dr. Gad Saad and Coleman Hughes. It's on Coleman Hughes' channel, for the record. Also, again, check out Coleman Hughes' song. It was, again, they were doing kind of a medley, I think, where they were flipping into the next version, which was Stars and Stripes. But yeah, very interesting, like kind of acoustic rendition of that on his channel. All right, moving on. What Killed Every Pop Star by Dr. Mike. Again, like I feel like I've been getting like I don't want to go too much into this, But I feel like in this scenario and with regards to some of the other videos I've been watching, like I really like CoffeeZilla's videos, but I don't really have a lot to say about them because like it's finances. Like I don't really know enough about that to discuss it on a really high level. Every observation I can make, it feels like it's just this pedestrian thing, technology. I like looking at technological videos, but I'm practically a Luddite. So like, I guess maybe I want to kind of get out of watching some of these videos, but this one seemed a little bit more in my line in that it's a little bit historical as well. So maybe we'll see. For the record, kind of, I want to offer a friendly critique to people like Asmongold, because I feel like Asmongold, I like what he has to say about certain subjects, and for the record, I agree with him on political subjects. I just feel like I agree with him on quite a few of those, but I feel like you put him in a scenario where he has to discuss like the really litigious aspects of something, and he's not that great. He's at his best when he's just talking shit about games or maybe social issues or even moral stuff. It's more intuitive or whatever. But you put him in a scenario where he has to discuss something that's really litigious politically or something like that, and he kind of is out of his element, if you will. So my advice: Elon, stick to technology. Asmongold, stick to video games and talking crap about drama and whatnot. You're good at that. Anyways, and I'll try to stick to stuff I kind of at least am interested in or have something to say about. All right, let's get into this.
Violent gang murders.
Sorry, maybe I noticed this before, but yeah, it's just kind of his initials with a stethoscope. Stethoscope? Not a steth. Is that what it is? What's the one for hearing heartbeats?
A devastating plane crash and a shocking number of drug overdoses that always seem to happen at the age of 27. You know their songs, you know their albums, but do you know how our most treasured musicians and pop stars died? Let's start with Michael Jackson, who in 2009 was killed by his personal physician in an extremely reckless attempt to
What the Harry?
treat Michael's insomnia. He accidentally administered him an improperly balanced cocktail of medications, including the anesthetic and sedative propofol, that caused him a cardiac arrest. His doctor was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, and the death was unnecessary and heartbreaking to millions. It's actually a key reason why I say rich people, despite all their money, often receive some of the worst health care. Buying your way into good health with expensive scans, medications, and specialty tests can unexpectedly backfire, just like it did for MJ.
That's strange.
Liam Payne was a member of the British boy band One Direction. He died in 2024 in a tragic accident in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Allegedly, Liam returned to his hotel behaving erratically and violently. He was held back to his room and the police were called. By the time they arrived, forensic reports indicate Liam had passed out on the balcony of his third-floor hotel room and tumbled 45 feet to the courtyard below. The fall ended his life, and
What the Harry?
an autopsy revealed he had traces of...
I just feel like people who live life in the fast lane, just in general. No, I've heard it like some sort of statistic. It was that literally just like extramarital affairs increases your likelihood to, like statistically speaking. Obviously, there would be other things probably involved with that type of psychological profile, but just like that itself is a little bit indicative of like a higher percent chance to get murdered or die on it, maybe something like that. I'd have to look that up though.
alcohol, cocaine, and antidepressants in his system. This
Holy crap. Don't mix. Don't do drugs, but don't mix.
combo can easily lead to disorientation, poor coordination, and even syncope. While the fall had been ruled
I don't know what syncope means. I should probably look up that one as well.
accidental, 2 men are still facing charges for having sold Liam the drugs. Norma Jean Mortensen became the first American sex symbol after a massive career as a movie star in the 1950s, but you probably know her better by her stage name, Marilyn Monroe. She not only recorded popular songs like A Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend and starred in classic films like Some Like It Hot Unfortunately, she likely suffered from serious mental health problems and substance abuse.
To be fair, I'm gonna guess that's most of Hollywood, probably. Just saying. Just saying. There's a certain type of person I think that gets into acting, and it's probably people who have, I don't know. That would be a intriguing study.
At just 36 years old, she was found dead inside her Los Angeles home after an overdose of barbiturates. It's a type of insomnia medication that we no longer use for that purpose. It was
Barbiturates. Yeah.
thought that this tragedy was potentially self-inflicted, but conspiracy theorists will tell you that she was actually killed by President Kennedy and his brother Rob.
Oh dear, guessy. To be fair, like that whole genre of celebrities, it feels like there was lots of stuff going on there. I don't know.
Robert, who were entwined in some salacious love triangle and wanted her silenced. Still waiting on good evidence for that one. Another conspiracy, how about the death of Elvis Presley? The first American rock star and arguably the most iconic musician since Beethoven, Mozart. He's one of the big guys for sure. After growing up...
Is he a crooner? That's where he came into stuff? So there was a whole genre of kind of singers that came into that idea. You ain't nothing but... He almost sounded like... I think that would maybe been what that was. I just like looks like an angel. Something you can start humming every time some woman is giving you trouble. Looks like an angel.
Poor in rural Mississippi and drawing great inspiration from gospel music, R&B, and country, he went on to record...
Okay, what's R&B? Rap it? No. Yeah,
multiple platinum-selling records, star in box office hits, and perform in an extravagant...
My dad says he thinks... Well, I don't know if it was the Beatles or something like that, but he thinks a lot of the hype was manufactured a little bit. And that's... for the record, I think that's kind of possible. That it might have been something that was like astroturfed or the like. The studios would have... a whole bunch of people show up or lots of publicity or something. I don't know.
Las Vegas residency. He was also an early health influencer, getting a polio vaccine before his appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh, it's just like the COVID thing.
To encourage Americans to get vaccinated against the disease.
Yeah, vaccine.
Unfortunately, his healthy behaviors ended.
Sorry. I've talked about this before. I tend to be a notion of if you want to get it... The archaic notion of vaccines is pretty intuitive, honestly. But I feel like the newfangled stuff they have these days is perhaps a little bit more dubious or complex at the very least. So I would be in favor of people getting it if they want to or not. Just, my body might... I don't like using that slogan, but yeah, in this case, perhaps so.
There. Elvis became nocturnal, a prescription drug abuser, and a potential food addict. Get
I'm shocked.
this, he once flew his private jet across the country to Denver, Colorado, just to eat the Fool's Gold Loaf sandwich, a deep-fried peanut butter and jelly and bacon
What the Harry?
monstrosity that came in somewhere around 8,000 calories.
That does not seem like a very intuitive combination of ingredients. Just saying.
It was this extreme lifestyle that ultimately did him in. Elvis died on the bathroom floor of his Graceland mansion of a myocardial
Or so they say.
infarction
The king is alive!
or a heart attack in 1977, likely contributed to by his heavy prescription drug abuse. Or he got on an alien spaceship and flew to another planet.
Yep. Yeah, that's what we're going with.
Pick whichever internet chat room rumor you prefer. Amy Winehouse was a British music
See, I feel like I would have maybe remembered this. I'll have to know exactly when she died, but...
icon who became a mainstream success in 2006 because of her album Back to Black, which contained the hit song Rehab. Unfortunately, the lyrics of "They tried to make me go to rehab" were tragically ironic as Amy suffered from substance abuse and related conditions throughout most of her adult life. In 2011, she was found dead in her London home from excessive alcohol consumption. She is a member of the heartbreaking 27 Club, a group of pop culture icons that all died at the age of 27. In one of her
Not there.
final projects, she actually collaborated on an album with Tony Bennett, the suave and cool crooner whose career spanned 70 years. He continued to perform well into his 90s until he was finally taken by Alzheimer's disease, a condition that slowly kills brain cells and makes the brain shrink. Interestingly, with the lifestyle
Strange.
research we have now, we believe about 40% of cases could be prevented. And while his voice may have been legendary, it was not as good as Whitney Houston's, who Tony Bennett said had the greatest voice of all time. She was a
I think I've heard that like name before. I don't know if I've ever. Well, I have heard that song too, actually. So I guess I wouldn't have known like really what the story behind it was.
Grammy-winning musical artist and also had a successful run as an actress, starring in the 1992 movie The Bodyguard alongside Kevin Costner, where she famously sang "I Will Always Love You." Her marriage to musician Bobby Brown was tumultuous, and she also struggled with substance abuse that
Again, I'm shocked. No, I don't know what it is, but everything about that fame and it feels like that there's an untoward level of stimuli that goes along with it that is perhaps causal in some of this stuff. Just the notion of all that fame, all that stress, all that the weight of fame and fortune, I guess, that goes along with it. I feel like that could be part of why people get like this. Or at least like a somewhat causal in that.
negatively impacted her incredible voice. In 2012, Whitney Houston was found dead in her bathtub with an autopsy revealing accidental drowning with contributing factors:
What? The drowning in a bathtub?
heart disease and cocaine intoxication. Tupac Shakur was a key figure in the establishment of America's 1990s gangsta rap movement. His activist message in music and film shine through, speaking truth to power about corrupt policing practices and America's prison industrial complex. On the night of September 7th, 1996, Tupac was in Las Vegas,
Well, there's a Ferrari thingy in the back here.
leaving the arena after watching a Tyson fight. Tupac was then hit in the chest 4 times in a drive-by shooting by a hidden assailant who sped off. Tupac died 6 days later. The case ran
Did it? Allegedly. No, I don't know. That's kind of the rumor mill, I guess,
cold
at
for
work.
nearly 30 years
I think that it is the kind of the conspiracy, right? That Diddy had something to do with it.
until 2023 when Dwayne Davis was arrested and charged as the ring
Hold on.
sped off. Tupac died 6 days later. The case ran cold for nearly 30 years until 2023 when Dwayne Davis was arrested and charged as the ringleader of the group that
Specious. Misleading.
carried out the murder. Unfortunately, this was just one of the many high-profile gang-related killings in the 1990s.
I guess I don't know. Maybe that is kind of a close case. I don't know. I just know there were a lot of conspiracies about who was doing what there.
Followed by that of Biggie
I
Smalls.
say a lot. I think there was just the only one I heard of was the one involving what's his number?
Or Notorious B.I.G., legally known as Christopher Wallace. He was another pioneer of the 90s gangsta rap movement, reviving the East Coast rap scene in my old stomping grounds of Brooklyn. He actually dropped out of high school to sell drugs,
Brooklyn.
but he was also bursting with natural talent, earning him a Grammy nomination and opportunities to collab with Michael Jackson. It was highly suspected that this East Coast rap revival ultimately led to his death, as Tupac was a West Coast rapper and Biggie was from the East. He was just 24 years old and his murder remains unsolved. Frank Sinatra was a defining singer and songwriter
So I feel like he was a part of the whole Kennedy kind of clique that was going on a little bit.
of the 20th century who also dazzled audiences with his performance on stage and on the silver screen. His cultural impact was tremendous, from winning Oscars to performing.
Didn't Dean Martin? I think that was Dean Martin there. I think he died of alcohol stuff. Famously a very big drinker, I think. I say famously, I guess I don't know if he was famous for that. I know he was a really big singer, and I think he died of, I think he was drunk a lot of the time.
For screen. His cultural impact was tremendous, from winning Oscars to performing with Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. as the Rat Pack to helping JFK win the presidential election by serving as a liaison between the administration and the Italian mob?
What the Harry?
Allegedly.
For the record, I think there were stories that he was kind of yoked up with the wise guys. That's a completely terrible phraseology, but yeah, I think he was involved with the mob.
He died at the age of 82 from a heart attack, likely contributed to by a lifetime of alcohol and tobacco use. Remember that we have clear proof that alcohol, especially when consumed in large amounts, is cardiotoxic. John Lennon was the iconic Beatle who helped ignite.
Kill John Lennon. Kill. Sorry. I don't even really watch South Park. That's just I see all the memes and whatnot. It's hard not to get like in the same way like Game of Thrones and a whole bunch of them. They're just kind of ubiquitous on YouTube these days. You see all the memes and I do like watching greatest hits sometimes. I want your jewel. Sorry. Who is the name of the Jew in that one? The 9/11 one where Cartman is trying to pin it on the Jewish kid.
The British
Hilarious.
invasion of rock music in the 1960s. He co-wrote legendary songs like A Hard Day's Night and Imagine that have been inescapable in pop music. His death sent shockwaves around the world when it was announced on Monday Night Football on December 8th, 1980.
John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous perhaps of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back, rushed to Roosevelt Hospital. Dead.
So I wouldn't have thought of like the Beatles as being kind of involved with anything really violent. They're kind of, I guess I don't know though.
On arrival.
A crazed fan seeking fame named Mark David Chapman sat waiting for the legendary Beatle to
Or so they say.
emerge from the Dakota, his famous apartment building on the Upper West Side of New York. When he did, Chapman shot him in the back and shoulder. As Lennon's body lay bleeding on the New York sidewalk, the doorman turned to Chapman and said, "Do you know what you just did?" He excitedly replied, "I just shot John Lennon." Creepy. As Howard Cosell
That is strange. It's like a social media hive mind mentality before there was social media. Well, technically, I guess there was still the news, there was still the cameras, there was still all that stuff. But man, it's a brain rot at its finest.
said on Monday Night
Clout Goblin at its finest.
Football, John was quickly
stuff.
transported to a nearby hospital where he was declared dead on arrival. John Lennon is not the only Beatle that we lost, though. George Harrison, who is responsible for songs like While My Guitar Gently Weeps and Here Comes the Sun. In 1999, he was attacked in his own home by an intruder and received multiple stab wounds. But he survived with a collapsed lung. It would have taken an even more aggressive killer to take down George Harrison. Unfortunately, that would wind up being oral cancer, likely caused by a lifetime of heavy smoking. The Beatles weren't the only British rock band to dominate the airwaves, though, paving the way for Freddie Mercury of the band Queen.
He was a good singer, really good. I've gotten the idea he had like a really crazy range as well. Or maybe I'm thinking that they just had like one of each in their band. I'm not for sure though.
Who pioneered an original sound of operatic rock music amidst a decade of disco. He
Bohemian Rhapsody? Is that what that?
is not only one of the most dynamic musical performers of all time, but a queer icon. Known for his sexually fluid lifestyle,
Ooh.
unfortunately, the sexual freedom of that era likely led him to contracting and dying
He looks like Johnny Depp there. Literally looks like Johnny Depp.
from complications related to AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. AIDS
He was actually weird. I think he ended up giving his house to kind of a girl he liked but wasn't attracted to him, like because he was gay or something. But yeah, I don't know. It was kind of a weird type of, yeah, romantic / emotional / I don't know what.
Is caused by HIV, a sexually transmitted infection, and damages a person's immune system, making them highly susceptible to other diseases and complications. Today, pharma breakthroughs have created antiviral treatments that protect HIV patients from developing AIDS, allowing for an almost identical lifespan to those without the condition, given an early diagnosis. Prince's rise to fame came in 1983 when his first crossover hit.
I don't know if I ever really heard much of Prince's stuff. Fun fact, when you say Prince's, it almost just sounds like princess.
Little Red Corvette had a music video air on MTV.
Under the Cherry Moon. The only reason I know that is from a Psych episode where I think they were talking about how, I think, what was the girl? I can't remember her name. Juliet was like, oh, I saw Prince, or we found Prince. Was he in a little red Corvette under a cherry moon?
Entering him a massive, massive audience, making him one of the first black musicians to air on the network. His album, Purple Rain, won an Academy Award, and he's also known for having delivered perhaps the most legendary Super Bowl halftime show ever in 2007 in Miami in the rain. He was the definition of cool. He was an electric performer, but decades of leaving it all on the stage took a toll on his body, leaving him in a lot of pain, which led him to use prescription pain medication. In 2016, he was at his home in Minnesota when he collapsed inside of an elevator after taking what he thought was prescription Vicodin, an opioid pain reliever, but was instead a counterfeit medication laced with deadly amounts of fentanyl, which is 50 to 100 times more potent. He didn't even know.
Well, it's like fentanyl before fentanyl was a thing.
What he was taking. David Bowie was a prolific British rock star who released 26 albums in just 50 years. This guy worked. His hits Young Americans and Heroes are only a couple of the dozens of his songs.
I don't know if I really listened to a lot of David Bowie stuff.
Dominated the charts in the 70s and 80s. In 2004, he survived a heart attack while on stage and retreated from public life for about a decade. He never stopped making music, though, producing work until 2016 when he died of liver cancer, a condition he kept so secret that many of his bandmates didn't even realize he was terminally ill. George Michael was a British pop star who blew up thanks to MTV with this massive
that one I would have known that song in any case.
Hit Wake Me Up Before You Go Go by his band Wham, which went on to become the first Western pop band.
I don't care. He has a band named Wham. Ridiculous.
To tour China. In 1998, he was arrested for disorderly conduct when an undercover police officer observed him performing a lewd act in a public restroom in Beverly Hills. You can read the details on your own if you'd like, but the incident forced George Michael to come out of the closet on CNN and establish himself as one of the most prominent gay figures in media. Unfortunately, his popularity waned over the next 15 years or so, and his drug use increased. He died on Christmas Day in 2016 from dilated cardiomyopathy with myocarditis and fatty liver. Kurt Cobain was the singer and leader of the 90s alt-rock band Nirvana. By all accounts, he had a happy childhood until his parents divorced, which sent him spiraling and changed his outlook on the
To be fair, I imagine that has quite a bit of an effect on a lot of kids.
World. He funneled this point of view into the music for his band Nirvana, which released a debut album called Nevermind, and whose single...
I'm assuming that's a left-handed guitarist, right? Because I think he would the dominant hand would be the one strumming, whereas the other one would be the one holding, right? I think that would be the case.
Smells Like Teen Spirit became a defining song of the 90s and the alt-rock genre. He married singer Courtney Love, and the two had a child, but unfortunately things for Kurt weren't going well. He claimed to suffer for years from stomach pain, which led to depressive symptoms, which he medicated with heroin and painkillers. He actually
what could possibly go wrong?
overdosed on champagne and Rohypnol, which is 7 times more potent than Valium, while he was in Rome, and was sent
Holy crap, that's weird.
to a rehab facility in Southern California. He escaped, fled north to his home in Washington State, where his life ended at just 27 years old. Marvin Gaye was a soul musician known as the Prince of Motown. And while his music may have been romantic,
I kind of like Motown, but like that style of stuff. I don't know if I've ever really gotten to Marvin Gaye stuff. I also don't. I don't really like jazz in general. And maybe that's what Motown is. Maybe I don't like Motown. I'm not for sure, but I like. There's a weird. I guess I just in general I don't like jazz, but for whatever reason I really like the style of music, whatever it is, on the Sly Cooper soundtrack, which is actually like I do it on the intro to my streams, kind of. But that's a really cool soundtrack. If you want to look it up, there are copies of it on YouTube, so you can listen to the whole thing. But it's a really cool, both the second and the third. I don't know about the first really, but like the second and the third Sly Cooper games. If you look at the soundtrack, really cool soundtrack, second to none in my opinion.
and rich, his death was truly heartbreaking. In 1984, he had enjoyed enormous industry success, but also racked up debt due to his cocaine addiction. The 44-year-old singer moved in with his parents in an
Again, shocked, astonied.
attempt to get on his feet. Unfortunately, his relationship with his abusive father had reached a breaking point. The two started an argument that led to a
I wonder, like, if like the experience of celebrities back in the day would be almost parallel to our experience with regards to social media and all the news that we get these days. Because again, I don't think we're meant to have that much stimuli and to worry about that much and have that much going on in our lives. Like, I feel like, I don't know.
physical altercation in the house.
There's a certain level of stress that we're meant to deal with, perhaps, and that's perhaps even healthy. But what we have going on these days, maybe not so much.
In Marv.
Right. Oh, we'll finish out this one, and then you can watch the rest of it on your own.
Marvin's growing cocaine-induced paranoia, he had actually given his father a revolver to protect the family. This would lead to his death. Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by
Not the area.
his own father with that very gun. The LA County Coroner's Office officially stated that he suffered a gunshot wound to his chest, perforating his heart, lung, and liver. His father pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter and received a sentence of probation, with the judge ruling Marvin had provoked the attack and any prison time could be a death sentence for the frail old man. According to Marvin's
That's unfortunate.
brother, who cradled him in his arms during his final moments, his last words were, "I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I made him do it." Johnny Cash.
All right. You guys can check the rest of that out if you like. I think we're going to skip that for today. We'll just go right into the video game part here. All right. Dream Engines. I hear the trader coming. It's coming round the bend. Alright, let's see what we got here. Let's see. What do we have? Alright. any luck. Oh, this is a nice one because I think I started out on a very an actual 0 threat level. All right, I'm not finding anything out this way. Out for the love. Oh, there we go. Here's something. Alright. It's... Get... Oh, that's ruins. Alright. Well, that's not going to help us much, is it? Oh, huzzah! Alright, is there anyone else here? No. No. Right. Alright, there we go. There we go. Now, where are the bloody little... What the? I could have. Oh, no, wait. We do have at least one. All right. All right. That should do for now. Unfortunately, I don't think I have crystal for that. I think, though, I set up one of these if I like. That is not the correct thing, you imbecile. This is the right one. Now, let's get some starwood going here. Might as well. Alright, now we have that stuff going. Should probably do some of this if we can. Nope. Bloody Nora. Cool, blimey, governor. Upkeep, research, production speed. I'm not doing much research right now. probably could start upgrading some of these things if we get a chance. And I might create 2 inroads here. Feels like there's some of this stuff that's literally just going in. So there's a couple extra here and there. Alright. Do that too. And we're still good on citizens too. Huzzah! Alrighty. Is there any featherstone on this? There, yeah, there we go. There we go. So, again, what do you need for this stuff? Not these Alright. What the? You done? Jackass? Alright. Yoink. Where are the openings? One here. Get another. Very annoying. Exceedingly annoying. Alright, here. Okay, let's go here. 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 All right. Get it going. Blueberry farm. That's what it is. All right. Stone. So this is carbonite, right? Infrastructure upgrade. Carbonite plus feather crystal. I'm assuming carbonite is something you have to collect, right? Many poor souls suffocate after trying to eat one of these. Or it will be removed from storage. All right. Come on. Oh, goodness. Forgot about that. Now we're... Oh, what the deuce? There we go. The beauty of it all. All right. Stick that out here-ish, maybe. All right, now featherstone, 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 featherstone. Anybody else? Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. All right. Oh, Tannenbaum. Vidrustu. All right, now, all right, there we go. Alright, just need a little bit more stuff for that. Alright, yeah. Marriage. Marriage is what has brought us together here today. So we need crystal before we can get some of that stuff. Let's see what we got here. Cactus collector. I don't know what that's for. Anyways, boink. I'll stick with feather stuff right now until that gets where it needs to go. Wait, are we actually getting... We are not getting... What the deuce? Like... Keeps going to this bloody thing. Alright. No. No. Yes, it's wonderful that you're trying to research stuff, but I want some other stuff, okay? Some of this stupid wood. Alright, we should probably finish building some of these walls. It's gonna be a great wall, wonderful wall. People say it's the best wall ever. I don't say that, people say it about it. I say, Mr. President, you have the best wall ever. But, what the Harry? Didn't even need that. Alright, now. It's because I'm building so many walls. Alright, I think I'm going to have to switch some of those other ones because this is not going to be... Management. Yeah. Let's upgrade. So I need carbonate stuff and this acid rock stuff. Let's see, but I think you need a pretty high level difficulty map for that type of thing. I think some of those resources only really... Let's just... Alright. That's alright. Alright, Harry. good bit of that stuff going in still. Now, I'm gonna move some of this crap. Might have to destroy something. Maybe just run. Well, that's a lot of track to lay. We just run something along here, over there, over there. All right. We shall do that, I believe. Now, destruction. And unfortunately, we're low on power. How delightful. What the deuce? Level 4. Fancy, fancy. Oh, what the heck? That was a farm. No, that... Somehow it's just my brain was glitching out. You know, I think I might start just leaving, like, the resource gathering part of this type of stuff. Like, the resource gathering stuff, because I can upgrade those things, I think, pretty easily. Like, this isn't that hard. No, this one isn't even upgraded, alright. Okay. Could prefer this one not be. I believe I have to pick up the the scraps. Alright, I might just kind of check if there's any research to do. So unfortunately, I don't have the resources on this one to get kind of what I want. Cavitus collector. Okay, so carbonite. So actually, no, you make carbonite with. Is it crystal and whatnot? Need carbonite and feather crystal. Interesting. Alright. So what are the recipes here? Alright. Carbonite. Crystal, harvested, and a carbon mix. Refined cavities full of energy. Output. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. So maybe I should try to go for this before it's all said and done. At this point. And we're back in business, baby. Could put another one right here. Want to keep a little bit of space, maybe, till the last. Some walls yet, unfortunately. Stay away from the runaround suit. Oh, 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 broken heart. Stay away from the runarounds. We're still gonna have workers for now. At some point, I might actually wait because I'm gonna go grab some of that fuel. Ouch! Shush! Forgot about that. Out! Ready! Slack breath. Or didn't it? I was probably distracted. Actually, let's move this. This one here. This one here. Now, unfortunately, no. There we go. Star wood. And we are unfortunately quite behind on electricity. This stuff here. Let's see. All right, now. Come on. You know, I should set up my resource things actually differently, where it just like the conveyor line runs into them, or at least runs into the last one, so we don't waste any of the wood. Because like as it is, it's just a lot of it goes straight into the town center, but then, yeah, if you run it along the ones like that, would actually be much more efficient way of doing things. I'll have to remember that next time around. There we go. 80. Alright. That's what it seems like. So if you ran it along this side and then came out this side, but just stopped it at the end of the whatever line of things you had, that would save you a lot of resources, so you wouldn't have to keep switching them so often. I say a lot, at least some resources, because I know sometimes a lot of it's like this will just be going past or something. So, okay, how does this work again? To make carbonite, you need crystal. So you just need crystal. You don't have to get feather crystal to do it, I think. You need crystal and carbonite. That should do. Alright, I'm gonna steal this guy. And bring him over here. Alright, let's do it like so. Run this. Alright, crystal harvester. There we go. Crystal miner. do it like so. And then... Presto. What the... Oh, because I don't have the... I assume it's because I don't have the resources, not because I can't build it anywhere. Come on. You've got it, buddy. Almost there. What's that? So actually there is a resource node that would require it. Dang it all. Alright. That's unfortunate. Thought I was going to have something there. I'm going to wait a little bit. See if we can get some of this stuff going. Should see if I can upgrade any of my electricity. I don't think I can right now. Not that one. Huzzah. Alright, what is the other acid power? Tar power? Like, is that more? It's 36 plus 22. So tar power increases it. This is 8. This is just basic. That's 22. Man, dude, I could get rid of quite a few of my things, I think, if I did that, actually. Tar power. Alright. Let's go like so. What the... No, I think I could get rid of quite a few of my thingies if I do this. That's like what? That's double, triple, almost. The power source I have now. Yeah, man. There we go. Unfortunately, I do not have enough. Croissant. Alright. Huzzah. Unfortunately, I need... Keep away from a runaround stew. Oh, oh. Whoa, whoa, Alright, I might get the heck out of Dodge here pretty soon. Alright, so I can actually probably get rid of this. And this. Now, do a little bit of building. Huzzah. What the? I feel like I should make these a little bit longer or something so they can actually be like a... more like consistent. That better? Yeah, I think I'm gonna start taking off here pretty soon. Pretty soon. I guess maybe the power is a little bit intermittent. And unfortunately, I do not have workers for something like that. Alright, you know what? We now got a couple of these guys. These aren't... they're doing diddly squat. Alright, a little better. 9.5, 11, 8, 3.9, 0.9. Plus 8, blah, 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 blah. So that's about even there. We'll leave that for now. I'll try to improve the rest of them later on if we get a chance. But for now, I bid you adieu. Alright. Thanks for watching. Yeah, bye.